So with that, tonight's broadcast is going to be on the Sonex YX and Xenos aircraft from Sonex Aircraft LLC. I'm sure we'll touch on the new designs as well at some point, which are the Onex and the SubSonex jet, or at least I hope to talk Jeremy into touching on those. Tonight's presenter is Jeremy Monnett with Sonex Aircraft. He is the CEO. He's an aeronautical engineer, spent a few years with Boeing, but the rest of his time has been over here at Sonex in Oshkosh. He's a private pilot, a lifetime member of EAA, and a member of the local chapter here at EAA Chapter 252. Got to get a plug in for my chapter here. So with that, Jeremy, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you, and let's hear what you have to say about the Sonex YX and Xenos.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Great to be back with everybody here. I'm going to get everything going with my presentation. We're starting in the middle here, so excuse me just for a second while I scroll back to the start. Really, tonight's goal is to educate everyone out there and talk a little bit about the overall Sonex product line, where Sonex Aircraft came from, what our particular goals are as a company, and really just see if these airplanes are right for you. That's the ultimate goal tonight. Again, we wish to achieve tonight. These are some of the things I'll be talking about as we get rolling in the webinar. The first is a current product overview. So those would be what we currently offer and what their strengths are. The affordable, best performance per dollar using our complete kit. To be honest, I think we're an affordable product line, whether you use scratch build or use the entire airplane. But that's the goal of affordability always in all of our products. A little talk about Sport Pilot compliance. A lot of people are curious about Sport Pilot. I know a lot of you out there have entered aviation as Sport Pilots and look to continue your journey in aviation as Sport Pilots. Versatility, we're always looking for something that can do a lot of different things, for a product that can be aerobatic, cross-country, or flown just for fun. We'll talk a little bit about the engineering behind our products, the build time, which is a question we constantly receive, an overview of our plans, which we feel are the best ever produced for a home-built aircraft. We'll also talk about a recent announcement, the FAA compliance using the new checklist, and brief updates, as Charlie just mentioned, about the 3 Hornets Nest R&D projects. So let's get started. Strength of the current products. Actually, a side note before I get started, please filter your questions to Charlie. We'll be happy to answer each and every one of them. And I know he's busy looking at different subject areas, and we'll cover those as we go through the presentation. Strength of the current products. What Sonex currently offers is mainly a 2-place, Sport Pilot compliant, aerobatic, affordable aircraft. All the things I just talked about. Here you see me flying the Tri-Gear Sonex during one of our recent workshops. You see we've received some tremendous press. Here is the YX with myself and my father in a Popular Mechanics from 2007. We also see a Xenos here, the Sport Pilot motorglider, as well as a 3-view of our standard Sonex. This was originally made in 1996, this 3-view. Also, a strength of current products are our AeroV engines have been tremendously popular, and I predicted a little while ago that our engines may perhaps become more popular than the airframes, which is hard to believe because the airframes are pretty popular. But all the things that make the Sonex great also make our engines great. This is the AeroV engine conversion. It's based on a high-performance aftermarket Volkswagen racing engine, which I can say firsthand. There were approximately 10,000 of these high-performance heads produced last year around the world, and about 5,000 of these crankcases, these aftermarket crankcases, as well as all the cylinder heads and pistons and that kind of stuff. So it's a great place for aviation to be and to build a product line on. Our new Aero Injector carburetor, which I'll talk about a little later in the presentation, and some of the aftermarket products we offer, like an exhaust specific to the Sonex Waiex Xenos. Let's talk about more of the current product line. This is our Sonex Sport Trainer it's kind of emerged as one of our most popular options. And that's why I wanted to talk about it in this presentation. The sport trainer, let's talk about a couple of features of what makes it a sport trainer. It has a tri-gear, which typically most of you are training in Cessna 172s, 152s, tricycle gear aircraft. And that's why I wanted to show this as kind of the most popular option. And then also the controls, in this case, are all moved to the center. So our typical controls for the Sonex would have the flaps and brakes on the left-hand side over here along the sidewall of the airplane. And this airplane actually has the throttle, the flaps, the brakes, and the trim, along with the mixture control, all moved to the center of the airplane. We also have Sonex Sport Acro. This has been very popular as of late with those that are looking for something that can do a little more than the sportsman class aerobatics that a lot of you are accustomed to. But you know, what's the reason we fly? We fly for fun is a huge percentage of why we fly. So when we talk about fun, there really is no way, in my opinion, to get more fun, well, other than acro and a glider. But you can certainly do sport acro in a powered airplane, and that's why the Sonex Sport Acro has been such a popular option. We actually ship the Sport Acro aileron standard in every kit, so you kind of choose your own adventure. If you just buy a standard Sonex kit and you want to build it in a Sport Acro, you'll have everything you need right out of the box. The YX has been very popular for this specific reason. It's a V-tail or a Y-tail in this case, because it does have a little rudder down here, which we love for spin recovery. But the bottom line is, what's the difference between a YX and a Sonex? Nothing, except what I just circled. It looks cool. It flies exactly the same, high speed, low speed characteristics. And I like to tell people, if you like a lot of attention, you build a Sonex. If you like all of the attention, you build a YX. People will be running from all over. What is that? What's that airplane you're building?
Jeremy, on the YX note, we've already got a good question that's probably appropriate right now from Ricardo. He says, the YX tail should produce less drag. Why is it not listed as having some performance advantage over the Sonex?
Good question. That's an excellent question, Ricardo. We're very conservative people. There's no question in my mind. That's me, actually, right there in the cockpit, having flown both the YX and the Sonex extensively. The YX enjoys a bit of a speed advantage over the Sonex. Not much, a few miles an hour, but I agree with you, having a tail surface this way, a tail surface this way, and a tail surface this way yields more drag than just having two tail surfaces here. So, but guess what? Most of your drag is here, 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 and here. So it's a smaller percentage. And by the way, those of you out there that are flying without wheel pants and tail fairings are costing yourselves a lot, 7 to 10 miles an hour, just with wheel fairings and wheel pants and gear fairings. So put them on. You'll go faster. Back to the next product is the Xenos. This is a motor glider. Why do you build a motor glider? You can launch with the motor and take off and then shut her down. And suddenly you have a glider, and in our performance measures, we've flown in formation with this motor glider, the Xenos, with a Schweitzer 233. Yes, the Schweitzer 233 is not a tremendous performance motor glider, but it's pretty decent and uses kind of a standard for the training glider. That's the Xenos. It's just a beautiful airplane. Note the long wings on both sides. So it is quite a bit more work than a Sonex or a YX, but what do you get for it? You get a motor glider for a fraction of the price of anything else you can get in its class. Note all three of these airplanes, the Sonex, YX, and Xenos, are two-seat, side-by-side, with a payload of approximately 400 pounds of people. That's two 200-pound people, 50 pounds of baggage, and about 100 pounds of gas. That's the way you slice it any way you want in our product line. And finally, the AeroV engine. This is something Charlie and I were just talking about earlier, about doing a dedicated webinar to the AeroV, because there's a very rich heritage in what goes into our AeroV product line. But note all these red parts around the engine. And the red parts are the CNC machine component parts that we've taken this stock racing VW based engine and we've turned it into an Aero VW engine, and the AeroV, pretty remarkable for what you get for the money. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention in our product line the Aero Injector. You may be familiar with the AeroCarb line. That's been one of the most popular aircraft carburetors available, period, within the aviation industry. And now we've introduced this new Aero Injector. It's a simplified version, believe it or not, as hard as that is. It's a simpler, lighter version of the AeroCarb. And this is the version with a round spigot on top and, round spigot on the bottom and a round intake on the top. And you can see with this version, it's exactly the same Aero Injector. It just happens to have a 4-hole flange adapter on the top and bottom for those of you that have an existing air filter you want to attach to on the top, and have an existing Continental or Lycoming engine you want to attach it to. We've sold thousands, literally thousands of these Aero Carbs and Aero Injectors, and we expect that popularity to continue with their tremendous simplicity and the ability to lean the mixture in the cockpit and save a lot of gas, and that means money. We're going to be talking about affordable a lot tonight. But I think the big thing, the big advantage the Sonex enjoys over anything else you can buy, build, and fly in the industry is that it is truly affordable. And when we say affordable, I hear this thrown around all the time about what an affordable product is, but this is our definition of affordable. A Sonex with an AeroV engine can be built spinner to tail wheel for $25,946. That's just the materials, doesn't include tools, doesn't include some shipping, but the bottom line is that's what you're going to have in the airplane in terms of writing a check to Sonex Aircraft LLC. Sonex with a 3300 Jabiru, you can see you can get about 50% more horsepower for $37,000. Amazing amount of performance for the price. Obviously, you have to put the airplane together, so you go on this journey with us. The Waiex with AeroV and Waiex with 3300 are a little bit more, and obviously the Xenos with AeroV and Xenos with 3300 are a bit more as well. Again, the Xenos is much more, not much more, but a percentage or few higher because it has a lot longer wings, a lot more component parts. And then we have our AeroV engine kit, which is included in these prices above. It is actually included, and I wanted to show that with our next slide to show you how do we get at this bottom line price of $29,946. We have our complete airframe kit, which I'm about to show you a picture of, $13,995. We have hardware, which is purchased through our partners at Waiex and Aircraft Spruce, about $1,000. The engine, AeroV 6500, the engine options, which would be exhaust and other firewall forward options, $495 and $500 respectively. Yeah, that's in the budget. The instrumentation, a lot of digital instruments out there, and this is something I could do a whole nother webinar on, is just on the instrument options you have for you out there. But in this case, we've included a budget of about $2,000 for instruments. The Sensonic propeller for $765 and the a standard upholstery kit for $700. So remarkably affordable, and you can go through all the other airplanes with engine combinations across the way, and you can get those prices that we just referenced on the previous slide.
Jeremy,
yes.
Charles has a question. Why is the YX more expensive than the Sonex since the YX has one less tail feather? Should be a discount involved there, huh?
Great question, Charles. The reason simply is the YX has additional welded components, which tend to be a bit more expensive. And when we came out with the YX kit, I'm just going to highlight the two prices he was talking about. When we came out with the YX kit, we actually advanced our technology on the laser cut side. So those big Y fittings that are the back of the front and back of the YX tail, your primary spars, are actually laser cut. Where in the Sonex, the guys still have to cut those out and cut them to shape and bend them. So you're doing actually, in my opinion, a little less work for the YX. But the primary reason are those more expensive components in the YX. Yes, it's one less tail feather, but that's the reason. That leads nicely into our next slide, complete airframe kits. I want to spend a little time here, and probably in the Q&A I'll come back to this and highlight any areas that attendees want to talk about and what's included in the basic kits. But the complete airframe kit starts at $14,000, and for $14,000 you get everything in this picture, and a little bit more, because this picture was taken a few years ago. But the primary things to highlight in this picture are you get the rotationally molded fuel tank, you get all the welded components including the motor mount, the axles, the gear legs, you get all the controls like the rudder pedals and the control frame and all of the control rods that go out to the primary controls. By the way, we love push rods. You also get all things like the formed ribs, front and back. There's a lot of ribs there, 26 to be exact, forward and aft in the Sonex. You have formed leading edge skins, all the laser cut tooling holes and all the primary rivet holes are pre-cut in the wing skins and the fuselage skins. Looks like you just took a Sonex kit and dumped it in acid and had it fall out on the floor, and that's exactly what you get. And the more recent additions, you can now actually buy the main wing spars, which are here pre-assembled with all the solid riveting done. You can also get all these. This is an angle bundle in the upper left-hand corner here, which used to be shipped just as a bundle of angle, and now you can get it pre-cut with all the machined angle parts. So you add about $2,000 for the machined angle parts, and you add about another $2,000 for the assembled spars. So you can spend a little more money for time if that's what's important to you. And this is how the kit arrives at your door: 4 feet wide, 4 feet high, 10 feet long.
Jeremy, I noticed that there's not any wing tanks, and John wanted to know if is that an option?
Sure. Wing tanks is the wing tank. Why we don't do it? We have removable wings. And that's very important to us because we want this airplane to be roadable. And I mean roadable in a practical sense, meaning you can pull the main spars out. You can pull the whole wing out of the fuselage and lay it on the floor, pull the other wing out of the fuselage and lay it on the floor, and that obviously makes your airplane very transportable. For practicality, what do you want to do? You want to take the airplane out to the airport after you're done constructing it. Maybe routine maintenance, you want to be able to haul it home, and all of our product line offers those removable wings, which, again, we think is very important.
And Jeremy, as a follow-up, how long does it take to pull the wings off?
Yeah, a very practical use. Once you gain experience, I've seen ridiculous comments having to do with wing removal. In my personal experience, it takes me 5 to 10 minutes with another person who knows what they're doing to pull the wings off. Putting the wings back on is a little different story. 10 to 15 minutes on the high side. Again, that's having at least one other person that knows what they're doing and can maintain a cool head, keep everything rolling. But it's not easily removable. I've never seen easily removable. Well, maybe until you see the Onex. But easily removable wings would be an exaggeration. But they are removable, and as I said, it's one of those things, once you do it more and more, it gets easier and easier. The complete AeroV kit, let's talk about that. This has been a huge growth part of our business as people understand just what they're getting for the money. Everything in this picture for $64.95. And let's talk a little bit about these red machine parts first. There's the Aero Injector we talked about, the flywheel, the accessory case. These are all leading technology component parts that you're going to put on a very advanced auto conversion engine. The secondary ignition system is here, purely electronic with these coils, and the primary ignition is right there, 2 little coils with 1 magnet on a flywheel. And the core of the engine is all right here. I'm just circling it in this diamond shape. And that core of the engine is about $2,000. That means that's all the wear parts of your engine. These are the pistons and barrels, the heads, the crankcase, the crankshaft. These are things that are you can readily upgrade and maintain. And as I said, some of you in the Continental or Lycoming world, $2,000 is what you'd expect to pay to overhaul one head, and that's what we're talking about for replacing the whole core of the engine. Amazing affordability. Let's talk about Sport Pilot, because a lot of people have questions about Sport Pilot. I know not only are there a lot of people entering aviation as Sport Pilots, but there's a lot of people that want to continue their aviation journey as Sport Pilots. This is what I want to spend a little time on. All Sonex aircraft in all configurations can be flown by Sport Pilots without exception. We've clearly gone through all of the requirements, and to be perfectly honest with you, we just happened upon happen to fall into this category because of the way we designed the airplane in the first place to meet the European ultralight category. Maximum gross weight of 1,320 pounds. All the Sonex models are about 1,100 to 1,200 pounds, with the Xenos being a heavier airplane. 1,400 for seaplanes. Well, guess what? We got a float plane too, so you now have an allotment if you put floats on it. 1 or 2 occupants. Everything we offer right now is 2 occupants. Maximum clean stall speed of 45 knots or 51 miles an hour. We happen to have stall speeds averaging 40 miles an hour. We're in good shape there. Maximum speed and level flight with maximum continuous power of not more than 138 miles an hour under standard atmospheric conditions at sea level. Wow, that's a mouthful. I'll talk about that in the next slide. Unpowered or single engine powered. In our cases, we're single engine powered unless you're flying as a Xenos and you shut it down. Fixed landing gear, yep. Single engine, everything. Fixed or ground adjustable pitch propeller, yep. And unpressurized. We meet all of the criteria for Sport Pilot compliance. Now these are the 2 most common questions we get as far as Sport Pilot goes. How does a 3,300 powered Jabiru Sonex meet the maximum airspeed requirement? Well, by definition, this is how the rule reads. Maximum straight and level airspeed of 138 miles an hour at sea level and at maximum continuous power. Max continuous power for the 3,300 Jabiru is defined in the 3,300 Jabiru manual, depending on which version you have, but it averages about 2,800 RPM. And the 3,300 Jabiru powered Sonex goes 135 miles an hour with the standard propeller under those conditions. So there's no top speed concern with any of our fleet. Why doesn't the Sonex have a gross weight of 1,320 pounds? So this is the common question. Why can't I just bump the gross weight of my Sonex up to 1,320? Well, stall speed can be most simply calculated. This is you can really read about this if you're interested, but most simply calculated by using 2 things: gross weight, wing area. The higher the weight, the more wing area you need to meet the stall speed requirement, which means if you're slower cruise speed and less overall performance using the same engine, we're not willing to make that compromise. We started designing the Sonex around a particular engine. We didn't start with a weight. We started with an engine. And we said, okay, with this motor, with this engine, what kind of weight makes sense, and what kind of wing area makes sense, and what kind of structure makes sense? So in doing that, especially with the AeroV and the Jabiru engines, we decided this is the appropriate place to be, and that ended up to be about 1,150 pounds. You start bumping that gross weight, you're not going to meet the stall speed. You got to add wing area. You start to slow down. And nobody, in my opinion, is going to have a Sport Pilot airplane that is going to outperform the Sonex because they're going to be hogging around at 1,320 pounds. That leads to our next slide, which is talking a little bit about the mission versatility of our entire fleet of airplanes. But the Sonex, Waiex, and Xenos, I can make a strong argument that the Xenos actually has the most versatility. But those of you that have flown the Sonex and Waiex, I know you're smiling all the time. But our fleet of aircraft, as far as mission goes, it's great for an around-the-patch fun flight. And this is about 95% of the flying that I do. I have a limited amount of time with all the things on our plate, which I'll be touching on a little later, and I love to fly. So to me, by combining those 2 things, I get about a half an hour around the patch, maybe an hour if I go out for a long lunch, and I'm smiling from ear to ear every second I'm flying the Sonex. Perfect for recreational aerobatics. We will not compromise here. Most of our competition is not aerobatic capable in the way we define it. That means it's structurally sound and can do loops and rolls and spins and all the things that we fly airplanes for. I can't stress that enough, and that's really what truly sets the Sonex, Waiex, and Xenos apart from its competition. Cross-country capable. I think we made a little bit of a mistake early on when we started marketing our product line. We said, it's not really a cross-country airplane. It's really more an around-the-patch or aerobatic fleet. Well, guess what, guys? You can do cross-country in the airplane. 16-gallon fuel tank, sipping gas, 4 to 6 gallons an hour at the most. If you're using an Aero Injector, you're closer to that 4 to 5 gallons per hour at 130 to 150 miles an hour. So you do the math, you can get places. The best fuel economy means more flying for less money. It's the greenest airplane you can buy now. Pancakes and hamburgers for $25 to $35. One of our employees and a good friend of mine, Carrie Fors, wrote a fantastic article called The $35 Hamburger, and I highly recommend you go to our website and read about what makes Sonex great. Engineering. This is another thing that really sets the Sonex family of aircraft apart from anything else you can buy. I don't care at what price. Engineered to FAR Part 23. For the lay people out there that are not familiar with what the FARs are, they are a design guide that the federal government put out many years ago that really dictates, here's how you design an airplane, and these are the criteria you use to design the airplane. Everything from gear drop tests to basic static design, loads for your wing and tail, your controls, everything front to back. Fly with confidence with an aircraft that's engineered and tested by the best in the business. That's us. These are just two pictures I grabbed from my computer this afternoon. One was a Sonex horizontal tail test of, and I'll let you engineers out there go ahead and crunch the numbers, but that's 590 pounds there and 590 pounds there on a standard Sonex horizontal tail. And yes, these are slack on both sides. We completely unloaded it, and we actually did a dynamic test where it was dynamically allowed to come down on the horizontal tail. It didn't break. On the right-hand side, we have a single Sonex wing panel holding 4,050 pounds of sand in a static load. This is a cantilever load, ladies and gentlemen. This is a beam supporting it at the bottom with steel supports, and again, completely unloaded at that 4,050 pounds, and that's finally when the wing broke. Are people still going to break a Sonex? Yes. Are they going to be doing something extremely stupid? Yes. The airplane is thoroughly designed and engineered to take care of you in all conditions. Low build time is another thing that has really separated the Sonex from the rest of the pack. We designed this airplane not only to meet the European standards that we talked about earlier, which, by the way, became the blueprint for the modern Sport Pilot here in the United States, but we also wanted it to be able to be built in a small factory with a limited staff and limited technological resources. So in my opinion, there's no question the Sonex Waiex and Xenos kit are among the lowest build time kits at any price. We obviously get this question asked all the time about build time. But your actual build time varies. Your ability to manage a project, to your ability to manage time, any large-scale project. Some of you out there will make mowing the lawn into a 5-hour ordeal, where if you're more like me, you want it 10 minutes. The more prepared, highly organized, and disciplined you are, the lower your build time is going to be, period. I wish there was more data kept with this, because in my opinion, if there was data about build time, the Sonex would dominate it, meaning we'd have the lowest build time of any kit out there. Why? Because of all the things I'm about to talk about that we arm you with: a simple airplane, very detailed plans, and a project you can plan for. Most Sonex builders complete their projects in 500 to 1,000 hours, and that's based on all the completions we've seen to date, and I think that's a very realistic and obtainable build time.
Jeremy, how many are flying at this point?
Yeah, I think you have to check our website, but at last check, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 300, something like that. And again, I'll defer to our web stats for that. But a lot. And I expect that to grow into the thousands, just as some of our competitors have done because of everything we've been doing right in the last few years. Using the Sonex plans, let's talk about that. This is just meant as a really brief tutorial. Those of you that have used the plans might want to take a little coffee break here. But the bottom line is, my goal here is to just introduce you to how the Sonex plans flow. When you see the actual, when you open up your actual Sonex plan set, this is what you're going to see for the very first page. Excuse me, this is actually when you come to the workshop and build the project, but you're going to see a very similar thing with the very first page, which we call our drawing tree, down here at the bottom. And this is where I'll start the real brief introduction to how the plans flow. The drawing tree includes one box for every plan sheet. And in the Sonex plans, that happens to be a 2-foot by 3-foot sheet of paper for every set of plans. So if we were to count on this page of how many plans were to be included in our builder's workshop project, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 sets of plans. So in this case, we're actually looking at this one up here in the corner, the Sonex X01 drawing tree. And a couple of features to point out here. In the lower right-hand corner, we have our just drawing description box. Our drawing scale on this one is none. Our drawing number, and this is what you'll hear me talk about a little bit in these next few slides, is SNX, which means we're working on a Sonex, X01. The X is reserved for our workshop presentation, and our 01 is simply the first drawing in the tree. We have a rev letter, which is down here, Rev A in this case, and why did we do a Rev A? Let's look up in the upper right-hand corner. Revision letter A was done as a change description. We changed the drawing flow for the X18. So in this case, we even included our revisions in our little workshop project. So we'll start down here. When people ask me, how do you progress through a project? Well, quite simply, when you're starting with a Sonex or a Waiex or a Xeno, so use them interchangeably here, you're going to start down here and you're going to work your way up. So we're going to start down here with our main Spar Web, the first thing this line, this water table line, is going to hit. And here is the SNX X10 drawing. Happens to be Rev B, who cares? Drawing scale 3/4, okay, I might want to note that. And on this page, we really only have one part, and that part happens to be called the main Spar Web. And it tells you exactly what to make it out of, 025 thick, 6061 aluminum. It tells you what to do, which in this case is to drill some holes in 14 places, and it even gives you very detailed dimensions both in inches and in millimeters on how to lay out and drill this part. So we're really basically just going to cut a rectangular piece of aluminum and put a bunch of holes in it vertically and horizontally. Tells you what to do. Back to the drawing tree. Once we've built our main Spar Web, that one part, we check it off. Move up. The water table's rising. We hit the, next part is the main spar caps, SNX X09. So I'm going to flip in my drawing tree to the SNX X09 main spar caps. And I'm going to take a 1x1 piece of aluminum angle, and I'm going to cut one leg down to 3/4 of an inch. And I'm going to call it, this is your introduction to the Sonex language. When I'm completed with the spar cap, I'm going to be building the SNX X09-01 spar cap. Welcome to the Sonex language. So SNX X09-01, I know what you're talking about. Carrie knows what you're talking about. The entire Sonex community knows what part you're talking about now. It's a 5-inch long, 1x1 piece of angle with one leg cut down to 3/4 of an inch. And we even include on some of these general construction order where you cut caps to length, mark, trim, and finish each cap to length. Another little note to make here, drawing scale is full, obviously. We have the rev letter. In the lower right-hand side, we also have what's called the dash number, which is the part, -01. It even gives you a little hint. There's 2 of them required, and the title is spar cap. So it reiterates the information that you already learned about when you met and built the parts. Very helpful when you start doing 10, 20 parts at a time.
Jeremy, are there any tolerances? Because a couple of people noted that there's nothing called out there.
Good question. In general, our parts do not list tolerances, and I know that's easy to be intimidated by. But to be honest, this is home building. As my father likes to say, you mark it with a magic marker. You chop it out with an axe. That's obviously a joke. The bottom line is, if you can build everything within a 32nd, is phenomenal. If you can build within a 16th, it's average. If you can build within an 1/8, to be honest, it's usually acceptable. But I like to shoot for about a 32nd of an inch. And if you look at your ruler, that's a huge amount when you're talking about mostly full-size patterns. So again, introducing you to the same stuff. Now we're moving to our first assembly drawing. So suddenly we're going to take the spar caps at the top and bottom. Those are those little angles that we just cut a 3/4 leg on. And we're going to go and rivet them, solid rivet them in this case, to that web we cut out earlier. So the drawing number is SNX X08. We are going to take the SNX X0901 spar cap and the SNX X1001 main spar web, and we're going to fasten them together using, in the upper left-hand corner here, AD5-6 rivets, 8 of them. And note, this is typical of the Sonex drawing tree. The solid rivets are clearly marked with larger holes. Really, the only reason you make a mistake is when you stop reading the directions, which I know people are very apt to do. And along the center line here, we're actually going to pop rivet a rib to this assembly, and that's also typical of the Sonex spars or the Waiex spars or Xeno spars. Once again, we include a general construction order. For those of you that prefer a step-by-step or a builder guide, we actually do include that on the plans, and you literally just step part to part, number to number to build your airplane. That in a microcosm is how the Sonex plans work. And if you use them, they will reward you quite favorably with a well-organized and very logical project. So we just built the main spar webs, we built the main spar caps, and we just looked at what's called the main spar assembly. So obviously if we were to continue this, we would move over here to the forward wing ribs and eventually attach the wing rib to the main spar assemblies in this wing rib installation, eventually add the wing skin, and you'd have something that would look like our workshop project. So that's a very basic introduction, but I encourage you all to come to the workshop and see the full presentation.
Jeremy, you mentioned both solid rivets and pull rivets, and Kevin would like to know, do you use both? Do you use, what's more predominant?
Yeah, the only solid rivets used in the Sonex are the solid rivets in the main spar buildup. So that would, just imagine this sub-assembly running 12.5 feet this way and this way, and you have yourself a single Sonex wing. And it just runs, there's a rib here and a rib here, keep on going. And the solid rivets would be between the ribs. The rest, almost 100% of the rest of the rivets are these blind solid rivets, which blind fasteners, which we love. You can work on them by yourself. And by the way, a stainless steel pop type or blind fastener is twice as strong in shear as a driven rivet. Interesting note. So when you get your Sonex plans, and that's when I was talking about the first slide of the project, this is what I was thinking of. We have ourselves in the lower right-hand corner a Sonex drawing tree. And I know this is very small on your screen, so time to order yourself a set of Sonex plans so you can see it yourself. But again, the process is the same as that little example I just showed you. When you begin a Sonex project, you're starting down here at the lowest part of the water table. And as the water starts to come up, you start working your way up the tree till you end up here, and I'll read that for you. It says airplane complete SNX B04. That's our goal. That's the finish line. Down here is the starting line. So the way the Sonex language works is SNX would mean Sonex. Those of you that were building a YX would be WIX, and those of you building a Xenos would be XNS. So SNX B03 is the drawing tree. 103 boxes on this drawing tree, happens to be 103 plan sheets in your plans. So SNX is always the first thing. On the left-hand side, we have C for controls. And if you follow this up, the SNX C are all the control prints for the Sonex. Over here, we have the fuselage. P is for power plant down here in the lower left-hand corner. We also have a little P for power plant over here. Those are the drawings that deal with your power plant installation. We have F for fuselage. I'm going to roughly sketch out the fuselage prints right here in the middle. Wow, the fuselage looks like it takes up about 1/3 of the whole drawing tree. Yep, about right. The W is for wings, and I'm going to gently sketch out the W for all the wing prints. There they are. Again, wing looks like it's roughly 1/3 of the project. That's about right. And then where I like to start is over here in the upper right-hand corner when we talk about vertical tail. And those of you purchasing a tail kit would only be getting these prints, the two that I'm circling right now, TO2, TO3, all the way down to T13. And SNXT stands for tail, F stands for fuselage, W stands for wing. Pretty logical. What's the remainder? G stands for gas. That's the fuel installation. Only 2 prints there in the middle of the page. L stands for landing gear, and they're spread out a little bit because we have a tri-gear and a standard gear. And then the B are the reference drawings, and the Z are the standard aluminum section drawings. So very logical once you start to understand and spend time with the Sonex plans. And again, I like to use my father's analogy. Building an airplane is like eating an elephant. You do it one little piece at a time. I'm starting right there with my horizontal tail. Then I'm going to start there, go to my vertical tail, and start working my way through the project.
Jeremy, this is probably a good time for this question. Have you had much success with quote-unquote dad and lad projects? Jeff has a son that's about 12 years old and pretty much on the ball, and he's built before, and he just wondered, have you had many situations like that, father-son projects?
Yeah, an excellent question, and we heavily encourage this. I'll do probably number one of a number of shameless workshop plugs. Come to Oshkosh. Bring your son, bring your daughter, bring your wife, bring your build partner. Yes, I believe for a lot of reasons of the slide we're looking at right now, yes, it can be a bit intimidating when you first look at it. But again, as you start to knock it down, as far as sharing a project with a son or daughter or build partner, I think there is no better than the Sonex, because you can start breaking it down page by page and part by part, and it's truly something you can say to your unskilled labor, whoever it may be, or marginally skilled labor, go ahead and build me the rudder, rib, and skin. Here's the SNX T13 drawing. If you do a nice job on this, and you get things very close to accurate, then I know that when I step to the next vertical tail miscellaneous drawing and the vertical tail stabilizer skin, I know everything's going to fit together. So, if you like to work together, it's perfect. You can just kind of have somebody over your shoulder holding my father likes to say holding the dumb end, which is what I did for a lot of years, and I learned a tremendous amount. All the way up to an advanced build partner who you might say, okay guys, let's split this project right here. You do everything on this side, you do everything on this side, and we'll meet somewhere at the top. And literally that is something you can do with the Sonex. But heavily encourage it, and I think it's the perfect project for that. It's truly an entry-level aircraft. Let's talk about something that's very significant. You're going to be hearing more about this in the news as time wears on, and I think it's very exciting because it means to me that the oversight, the FAA, those in charge of kind of administering the amateur-built rules, the freedoms that we have here in the United States to build our own aircraft, this is a very exciting step. And what it really means, long story short, Sonex Aircraft, along with EAA and a number of other leading kit manufacturers, have really worked hard to build these amateur-built checklists and these new rules. And you may have heard of a committee that was formed about 3 years ago that I've been very pleased to serve on. But here are the highlights. Sonex Waiex and Xenos kits, the ones you just saw in the pictures before, is very excited to say that we're the first official FAA National Kit Evaluation Team acceptance kits under the new orders and guidance. And the most significant part of that is these are new rules, and many times you have things that are new. I think people get concerned, and sometimes rightfully so. But in these cases, the people responsible for governing home built rules in this country, and the people who are the leaders, I feel, have done a tremendous job in very deliberately and openly working on a new set of rules and getting them initiated for our industry in order to preserve our industry and allow us to continue these great freedoms we enjoy to build our own aircraft. I highly recommend you read and understand the following documents. Yeah, your eyes might glaze over. Yes, it's not the most exciting stuff you've ever read, but if you're looking at building a Sonex Waiex Xenos, spend a little time on Advisory Circular 2027G. Just do your Google search or your web search on that number, as well as FAA Order 8130.2F and FAA Order 8130.35F. And we've even done a website for this. We're very proud of it. And it means that Sonex Waiex and Xenos builders will be the first to use this guidance and will have absolutely no problems whatsoever when they go to register their aircraft and start using it. And I know Charlie has a lot of questions. He just tapped me on the shoulder to tell me that, so I wanted to really briefly give you all updates on some of the very exciting research and development projects we have going, which is why I currently have bags under my eyes. And it's tremendous, the amount of interest that we've had in these projects, and we're very motivated to finish each and every one of them. I gave an entire webinar on the Onex a couple weeks ago with Charlie here at EAA, and I just wanted to show you what some of the progress is that we've made just in the last couple of weeks. You can see here in the lower left-hand side, that looks like a big pile of wing ribs. Yep, they're all done. Here are the main wing spars. And over in the far corner on the right-hand side, you can see the outboard wing sections. We're making a lot of progress on the Onex. We recognize there's a lot of interest in it, and I promise we're spending as much time as we possibly can on it, that cool wing fold mechanism we talked about. Also, this is that's an entire webinar, just giving you an update. This is an entire webinar just talking about our SubSonex, and I know there's a lot of interest from the general public on it. My father will be at Sun and Fun this week. I think it's actually Thursday this week and Friday, giving an update on the SubSonex. This is that PBS jet turbine. Those of you that got to see the glider that flew with Bob Carlton at this year's AirVenture, we're excited to see this very motor. We've now run it about a dozen times. Amazingly reliable motor, done quite a few taxi tests with it, and just haven't quite flown it yet, and that's part of me not being the boss. Jeremy Monnett is in charge of this project, and I'm very pleased to be right alongside him in watching this airplane develop. And let me tell you, when this jet turbine fires up, it gets your attention, it gets your adrenaline running, and it is an extremely exciting project for us at Sonex. It may never become a product, but if it does, I tell you what, it'll be the closest thing to you strapping on one of those Rocketeer backpacks and going for a little ride. Amazing little airplane. The E-Flight. These are from my personal archive of pictures that I've just taken as we've done integration testing. And the most significant picture is right up in the middle of this page. That's our new battery. Looks like an oversized suitcase, or maybe even a standard-sized suitcase. Well, folks, that has 15,000 kilowatt hours in it. And that battery in the upper center is actually going to be installed just behind the motor with the picture you see on the right-hand side, and it's going to replace the 28 lead acid cell stack you see running the E-Flight motor in this picture. On the right-hand side, you can see Andrew Pierce monitoring both computers. We have, in my opinion, the most advanced electrical control units of anybody else out there, and this is just something that, you know, it's maybe another 2 or 3 webinars just telling you about some of the things we've learned on this. And on the lower left-hand side, you can see this is our battery with just a communication port plugged in with a power supply to our laptop. And actually, you can even see my cell phone sitting on the laptop. That's Andrew Pierce on the other side of the line, as Pete and I and my father and Andrew work through this just gigantic project that perhaps will weigh in all of our futures. And I think I'm just going to turn it over back to Charlie. Maybe you have a few questions to throw at me, and then we'll do the wrap-up slide here in a little bit.
Jeremy, lots of questions. When is there going to be a folding wing option for the Sonex?
It will not be called a Sonex if we do it. What are the challenges of a folding wing Sonex? Let's talk about that. A folding wing Sonex would be a completely different animal. Let's use this slide, for example. This is a standard sport trainer. If I were to take the removable wing option and make it into a folding wing option, I would start from scratch. It makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever to maintain all of the weight and complexity, and to be honest, the Sonex is about as simple as it gets. So to maintain all of the stuff we have in the center section to allow you to remove the wings, and then move that outboard to about where that pedostatic system is, like the Onex, and add all of the complexity and parts for the folding wing, just wouldn't make any sense. If you're an enterprising home builder that wants to take on a gigantic project, great, go for it. But in my opinion, for those of you that are looking for a two-place transportable airplane that you can fit in a hangar, there it is. If it's a two-place airplane that you just want to take home once in a while, you pull the wings. Become adept at pulling the 2 main spar pins and 6 quick-release pins, and take it on the road. Again, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, and does the Sonex and the Waiex have similar crosswind capability?
The answer is yes. Having flown, again, that's me in the Waiex cockpit, having extensively flown both the Sonex and the Waiex, let's again draw our little Sonex tail on the Waiex here very crudely with my highlighter. The crosswind component, which would be what you're concerned about with the vertical tail exposure on the Waiex, we know what we're doing. We carefully selected the Waiex vertical tail, vertical component of the V-tail, to be roughly comparable with the vertical component of the Sonex tail. So what does that mean to you? It means that you're not going to notice the difference between flying a Sonex in crosswind and flying a Waiex in crosswind, which, by the way, are both very capable aircraft in even moderate to heavy crosswinds.
Okay, and Jeff's considering a Xenos. What is the longest Xenos assembly when you have to consider about building it in your house?
The longest assembly is the wing itself. Let's do some rough numbers for you because you're trying to get a handle on shop size. The wing runs from the wingtip. It's 40, just shy, and again you can pull this from our website. It's just shy of 46 feet, wingtip to wingtip, 45.86 or whatever it is. So you want at least half of that plus 20 inches. Because half takes you to the center line of the airplane. It's a 40-inch wide cockpit. So that's what you need.
But, Jeremy, aren't those wingtips removable?
They are. So you can get it down to just under 39 feet. But, you know, I like to do my wingtip fitting in the shop under a controlled environment. So that's why I answered it that way.
Okay, and Wallace would like to know if you can change the Xenos to a Waiex by putting the shorter wings on.
Very common question. Let's talk about that. In my opinion, it's a terrible idea. So basically what his question was, and again, it's a very common one. I'm not picking on you, and I appreciate the question. We're talking about a Sonex, which, you know, the wings would be about here and here. And with the Xenos, we added not only 1.5 feet of length going this way, but we also added about 20%, minimally, I think more like 30%, in tail to be able to fly the big wing. So what you'd be proposing, whether we go one way or another, let's say we put a short wing on a Xenos. Well, suddenly we have this big tail back here. And it's way, way too much tail for that short wing, and we don't have the responsive feel that has made the Sonex so famous and so popular. And let's go conversely, let's go the other way. Let's go ahead and try to slap these long wings on a very stubby tail. Well, suddenly the wings are flying you instead of you flying the airplane. Terrible idea. nowhere near enough tail to fly that airplane. So in my opinion, to answer your question directly, if you try to do too much with an airplane, you end up with a lousy sport plane and a lousy motor glider. I would say you pick the one that fits your mission best, or even better, you build one of these and one of these, and now you got the best of both worlds.
Okay, Stephen would like to know what the highest time AeroV is.
I think it's a little over 1,000 hours that I know of the modern AeroV fleet. There are maybe some unreported with more. The bottom line is the AeroV has this core we were just talking about, this racing core, has tens or more like hundreds of thousands of engines worldwide that are using those core parts. Extremely robust, extremely reliable, extremely inexpensive. Wow, those sound like three phenomenal things to me. There isn't a mechanic in America who hasn't worked on a VW-based engine. They all know what the parts look like. They're all capable of working on the parts. And finally, just in terms of overall reliability, I would put the modern AeroV, and I fly 5 of them at the factory. I'd put the modern AeroV up against any aviation engine, purpose-built, in terms of reliability and in terms of the TBO, quote-unquote TBO. Since you're building an experimental engine, you don't have to break it down anytime you don't want to, but against the TBO of any aviation engine. That's how confident I am in the product, and that's why I fly it every day I can.
You know, Jeremy, a good measure of that is insurability as well. What is the possibility of getting insurance with an AeroV engine?
Very, very common question, and the short answer is as good as it gets. The AeroV engine, again, because it comes from our team of designers and engineers, and because it comes with our level of support, which is unmatched in the industry, because you have those two things going for you, the insurance industry looks at this as a very favorable engine. Now, if you go and do wacky things, and you go and make a bunch of changes to the engine, and we find out about it, I'm going to report it, and you might have some issues if they're wacky things that we don't like. And again, that's tied to the reputation of the engine. We've built it, brick by brick, step by step, year by year, and it enjoys the reputation for a reason, because everything is on this engine conversion for a reason, and nothing is there that doesn't need to be. So anyway, long story short, we've got a reputation, and the insurance industry loves it.
Okay, and Dan wants to know if there's still a float plane option.
Yes. I didn't show a picture just because we don't have our current 1.2 CRX-ray on floats anymore, but yeah, it definitely is an option. Basically, imagine the sport trainer here. We actually put a standard gear motor mount, and it was the original Sonex 1.2 CRX-ray, and the tri-gear mounts, and then we picked up the big check floats, 1200 A's to be exact, and it added about $10,000 to the cost of the airplane, and it gave it float capability. So you most definitely can add floats to a Sonex, and we have some installation pictures that we did. To be perfectly honest with you, it just wasn't a very popular option. I think a lot of people that are looking for floats are looking for fishing trips and to go a little more remotely than we do. This is more of a sport flying airplane, but if you want to do it, you definitely can do it, and I encourage you to do it.
All right, and Wallace wants to know if aerobatics can be done with a pilot and a passenger.
Yes, the short answer is yes. It's utility category, so be very mindful of loading. When I did I was a low-time Sonex pilot, and I actually flew with one of the flight reviewers, and we were doing rolls, and we did a loop, and I've done them with passengers. You just have to be very mindful of your G loading, because that's where everything is driven from. You do not want to exceed the capability of the airplane. Yes, we're talented engineers, and yes, we built in a safety margin that probably nobody else in the industry has built in, but you just never want to reach those limits. But to be honest, 4Gs, that's pulling, that's a lot of maneuvers, a lot of aerobatic maneuvers. You just have to be really careful, especially as a low-time pilot.
Okay, and kind of a related question from Patrick, is the AeroV powerful enough for aerobatics, or do you need the Jabiru for aerobatics?
The picture we're looking at, which is the Sonex Sport Acro, has an AeroV engine in it. So to answer your question, absolutely yes, it's enough power for aerobatics. I have done aerobatics in this airplane. I've done aerobatics in this airplane. I've done aerobatics in this airplane. I've done aerobatics in this airplane. The answer is all of them can do aerobatics, and that is such a huge advantage you have as a Sonex Waiex or Xenos pilot over anybody else out there. The engineering is there, and the fun factor is there.
Okay, and Paul wants to build a YX, but he's unsure of what engine his budget will allow for by the time he gets to that point. Can he buy the complete kit and either buy it without the firewall forward components or have them shipped later once he decides?
We're covering them all. This is an amazing array of the most popular questions. Most definitely. The only thing that changes when you switch power plants is the cowling, the motor mount, and the spinner. The only three things that change. So let's talk about those in order. The cowling, the engine cowling, is the biggest with what we call a universal cowling, which was built for the AeroV engine and has flat sides. This airplane has a universal cowling in it. You can put a Jabiru engine in a universal cowling, but you can't put an AeroV in a Jabiru cowling. So my recommendation, if you're undecided on power plant, is to choose the universal cowling. And the motor mount, we ship with the kit, and I would recommend that you pick a motor mount regardless and get it shipped to you. I wanted to actually show the slide with the motor mount in it. So there's the motor mount and the cowling in the upper right-hand corner and the spinner sitting just above the plans. Those are the only three things that change. I've made a promise to every one of our original kit purchasers that if you purchase the airplane in a set configuration, the one in this picture is actually a standard gear AeroV equipped Sonex. And if you come upon some money, maybe you inherit a bunch of money or win the lottery, whatever, and you can now afford the large Jabiru, then you can swap out your motor mount, your cowling, and your spinner, and we'll make it work for you. But worst case, if you buy a second-hand project that maybe has the wrong motor mount, the wrong cowling, the wrong spinner, you can sell them very quickly to people who are plans building and buy a new set.
Okay, John would like to know why the fabric interior upholstery was discontinued.
Yeah, good question. Money. Our existing supplier basically is bumped the amount of money for a fabric upholstery. So we looked at the numbers, and the numbers dictated that the most popular upholstery by far were the leather upholstery and the Cordura, which is a very long-lasting, good-looking fabric, and that's the one I would personally recommend if you're on a budget.
Okay, and John wants to know if flush rivets are an option for the pull rivets.
Yes, we have two answers to that question. The first answer would be, can I put flush pull rivets in an airplane? And the answer is yes. All of our kits actually have on the order forms what we call a flush rivet option. So you can purchase that for a little additional money. Why? Because countersunk or flush rivets are a little more money from our supplier than protruding head rivets. So you can simply purchase that. It averages like what? I think it's $200. Refer to our documentation for that money. And then you can countersink and dimple the whole airplane if you like that look with a pull rivet. The other answer to the question is, can I use driven rivets in the entire airplane instead of these pull rivets? Well, number one, I think that's a dumb idea because you're just wasting time. But the answer is yes. You can drive the rivets in the entire airplane, most of the airplane. Some of our surfaces, like our control surfaces, are closed. So it'd be very difficult to, impossible in fact, to get a bucking bar behind the rivets, say in the aileron and flap and some of the bottom of the wing section where it's closed. But you can do that as long as you use a comparable rivet. So that would be a 1/8 inch driven rivet substituted for a 1/8 inch pop or pull type rivet. We're good to go.
Okay, and Mike would like to know on the AeroV Carb, what is the chance of carburetor icing occurring?
Slim to none. I would say it's probably close to 0%. We've been flying, or my father, more appropriately, has been flying the PASA, the Lake Injector, the Ellison, many similar carbs. I would say of all those I just mentioned, the Aero Injector is the least prone to carb ice of all of them, and the primary reason is the simple design, the straight-through venturi. It's just a straight-through hole with an interrupter and a tapered needle for fuel delivery. So I've never, ever seen a case of carb ice in these Aero Injector or AeroCarb, and nor do I expect to ever see one.
Tim wants to know, you mentioned about the fact that the wings are removable. About how heavy are they, and can his wife help?
Yes. First off, a single wing panel, which would be the items that I'm circling in this full kit picture, weighs 56 pounds. As far as what help you need, yes. Given practice, and I don't know how good your relationship is, I'm sure it's phenomenal. But if you are, patient, good people, you'll have no problem, two people, removing and reinstalling the wings on a Sonex. And, that's just the way it is. It's not easy. It's not simple, especially the first couple times you do it. But once you get the hang of it, it goes like clockwork.
Okay, what about, Mike wants to know about the possibilities for dissimilar metal corrosion given the stainless steel rivets with the aluminum airframe.
Awesome question, and another very common one. The stainless steel rivets we use, actually, let's talk about the aluminum first. Sonex, everything you see in this picture is 6061 T6 aluminum. That means it is one of the most corrosion-resistant aluminums known to man. No alclad. What's that mean? It means it doesn't have a thin layer of pure aluminum on the top and bottom like a 2024 does, which is what most of our competitors use. The reason we use, that's the primary reason we use 6061, but also because it doesn't have the alclad, it's half the price, which is why we can offer what you see in the picture for $14,000. It's all tied together. So the bottom line is we use a little thicker skin than some because we want a little extra strength out of the 6061. The advantage is when you go to drill a hole, you immediately get an oxidized layer so that you don't have to worry as much about that galvanic corrosion. And the oldest airframe we have is 1-2 Sierra X-ray built in 1996. It's 15 years old, been hangared. In remarkable shape on the interior. It's been out at Sun and Fun and Air Venture in the rain. But again, saltwater coast, if you're there, I wouldn't recommend doing any kind of priming of the interior, but I would recommend maybe painting the airplane when you're all done.
Okay, and Phil would like to know if there is or ever will be an option for an autopilot.
Yeah, there is. There's 2 autopilots that I'm currently flying with. There is an autopilot in, and I'm sorry, bear with me just for a second. I'll explain the airplanes. The Waiex has a True Track autopilot system, and the Sport Trainer has a Trio avionics. You can just see the knob of the Trio in the upper right-hand side there. I never turn them on. The kind of flying that I do, I like to fly the airplane, and that's great that we have them there. And by the way, both Trio and True Track are great companies to work with, highly professional. They'll answer your every question if you ever have one. But again, it gets away a little bit from what the philosophy of the airplane is. If you have a couple $3,000 to spend on an autopilot, good for you. go do it. We'll be able to support you with installation pictures, as will both of those fine companies I just mentioned.
Okay, Jerry would like to know if there's any glare or reflection experienced on the forward-sloping windshield.
Very common question. The answer is no. In my opinion, the best visibility of its class. So instead of having, a traditional, let's find more of a profile view here. Instead of having, more of a traditional flat glare shield, if you will, or extended cowling and then a bubble canopy like this, you just have this equal slope. A lot of people think this windshield bow is going to impact your sight. Well, maybe a half a degree of your overall sight from top to bottom. But no, that's the very first comment I hear from somebody who sits in the airplane the first time is, holy moly, I can see all the way around me. It's amazing visibility. So no, it doesn't impact it.
Okay, Jeff would like to know if anybody's put a silencer on the AeroV for flight over in Europe.
Yeah, you're asking about muffler. There's a couple muffler options. We toyed with them. To be honest, the 2-to-1 exhaust I mentioned is awesome. That is just a straight-up exhaust system. I'm looking for it here on my slide. I don't have it, I know. Basically, we take the 2 exhausts from each side and we bring them back, and then this one, I'm just drawing kind of a side view now, ties into that one, and then there's an extender pipe that attaches that comes down. And what we found is this is quieter than any other production fleet airplane, in my opinion, out there. It takes that bark away from the AeroV. And I highly recommend you just go with our standard 2-in-1 exhaust. For those of you that have very strict noise requirements, you may need to add a muffler. And that is really not a big deal to take and modify, especially after you've built an airplane, to be able to weld up some kind of muffler system that these exhaust systems feed into. But I don't like them just because of the heat. Anytime you add a muffler, underneath the engine, right behind the engine, on top of the oil pan, oil sump, it's just a big heat generator. So I'd recommend you try the 2-in-1 first, and if it sounds too loud, then make some modifications if you need to.
Okay, Richard would like to know if the how well does the Sonex tri-gear work on a grass airstrip?
Very well. I've flown the tri-gear out of grass, and we're going to go back to it, take a look at it. What makes it a very grass-capable tri-gear are the titanium gear legs, which are the main gear that I'm circling right now. The titanium is great. If you hold the nose wheel off, this is the nose wheel is a straight chromoly tube that comes up into a spring system, spring suspension. So I think people that would be a little lazy on holding the stick back and allowing the main gear to absorb, most of your initial landing roll, and then allow the tri-gear to come down and touch down at a reasonable speed, reasonable force, you're going to have a lot more success than those of you that just kind of let go of the stick and let it just plop down. So that's my answer. But in my opinion, if you're in a rougher field or a grass strip that's not all the way there, I highly recommend the tail dragger. You just can't beat it in terms of rough field capability.
Okay, and Bill's a 6'2" pilot and wants to know whether he'll fit.
Almost undoubtedly, yes, you will fit. I cannot say that across the board because I do, for whatever reason, get some people who climb into the airplane and stretch out and think that they're going to fly as a 6'6" pilot. But to answer your question directly, I don't think I've ever had a 6'2" guy that didn't fit in the airplane, especially with the 2-inch drop seat option, which kind of goes along with these sport trainer mods. You're going to fit. Best way to know for sure, try one on. Find a local Sonex builder, ask them 2 questions. Well, really one question: what seat configuration do you have? And if he has a lowered seat and you don't fit, then you must be mostly waist to head height.
Okay, Brandon says that he's been told that all Y-tail airplanes have yaw problems and that they're always trying to seek neutral. Is that true? The same problem with the V-tail Bonanza.
Shortest answer you've ever heard, Brandon. That is total crap. Absolutely untrue. And my evidence for you, Brandon, is the Waiex aircraft. I recommend anybody who has those kinds of questions or those kinds of concerns to go fly a Waiex or a Xenos. And you'll find whoever told you that is completely full of it.
I guess one thing worth pointing out, Jeremy, is that it is a Y tail and not a V tail.
It doesn't matter. A properly designed, and maybe that's what we suffer from the most, is the few V-tail options that have been available until today. V-tail or Y-tail, I really don't care. The few that have been available just really haven't been that good, with all due respect to those of you that may have designed some of those V-tail aircraft. If you carefully select the design angle, if you carefully select the amount of vertical and horizontal that will be exposed, in my opinion, there's no reason you can't have a V-tail aircraft that has exactly the same flight characteristics as a conventional tail.
Okay, and Tom wants to know what the horsepower of the AeroV is.
80. I guess I haven't mentioned that. 80 horsepower engine, and that goes back to kind of our Sport Pilot answer to the question of why we don't go 1,320 pounds. We designed the Sonex Waiex and Xenos around 80 horsepower. We happened to have this beautiful 6-cylinder Jabiru engine available at 120 horse for the same basic weight. And that is why we made that available. Also so happened that it met Sport Pilot with that bigger engine, which is phenomenal. But anyway, long story short, 80 horsepower. It's remarkable what our airplanes do on 80 horsepower, and that comes from my father, John Monnett's experience, and our chief engineer, Pete Buck, long experience with light aircraft and aircraft design, and between the two of them, I got the two best mentors you could possibly ask for in the light aircraft arena.
Okay, and is there a ski option available?
We do not have an official Sonex ski option, but I have definitely seen, and I'll get a tail dragger up here because that's going to be the best one to see, most definitely you could make the Sonex into a ski plane. Why haven't we? During the winter, we're working on new projects. I don't have a lot of interest in flying when I can't feel my hands personally, but there are a lot of people out there who enjoy ski flying, and there actually are some friends of ours that make some wheel penetration skis, some straight skis, and those of you that are really interested in pursuing that, I think the Sonex would be just an awesome ski plane.
Okay, and Larry'd like to know if the AeroV is adequate for flying in mountain areas, Colorado, for example, in the 12 to 14,000 foot range.
Sure. Solo, most definitely. And the best way to answer this question is to find comparable aircraft at those altitudes. So find something that has comparable sea-level performance advertised, or better yet, proven sea-level performance to the Sonex Waiex and Xenos with the 80 horsepower engine. They're right on our website for everyone to see. And compare that to some of the airplanes that might be at your local airport. And I think that's the best way to answer that question. We've had, solo, the AeroV is awesome. It can blast out of Whitman Airport, which is basically 800 feet, so call it sea level. And I routinely see 800 to 1,200 feet a minute climbs. And, with two people, heavier loading on a hot summer day, you're going to take up much more runway. I'm going to see 400 to 600 feet a minute climb, and those are the numbers that are on our website and that we advertise. So use those to compare and go to your local airport and find out what those are at sea level and answer the question for yourself.
Okay, we've had several questions about if there's any cabin heating options.
We don't have an official cabin heating plan, but the airplane you see in front of you has had cabin heat. At one time I had, and I'll use the little picture on the right-hand side of the Sport Trainer, I actually had a hole right here in the floorboard, and it actually ran a little piece of scat hose up and around to excuse me, it didn't have scat hose at all. It had scat hose firewall forward, but it was just a slider that would dump some warm air right on your feet. And so it was a fresh air inlet, just scooped a little air off of one of the cylinder head baffles and dumped warm air right on your foot. Great. I took it out. I don't fly when it's 0 or below. And if it's, if it's going to be a cold day and I expect it, which, by the way, those are the most fun flying days because you can blast out of any airport. But I wear nice gloves and wool socks.
Okay, and John wants to know if push-pull tubes are used for all flight controls.
The answer is almost all. The only cables we use are in the rudder setup. So the rudder cables, the rudder pedals extend down off the firewall, and then we have cables that come back to the bottom of the rudder. Everything else, aileron, flap, elevator, is all push-pull tubes. We love them.
Okay, and Andy would like to know if he can comfortably build a Sonex in a 12 by 24 foot shop area.
I tell you what, you would be amazed at some of the pictures I have seen of where guys are building Sonexes. The most amazing was a one-bedroom, Scott Cannon, if you're out there, love you, man. He built in his one-bedroom condo in Canada. And obviously a bachelor, those of you wondering. But he did. He
if he didn't start out that way, he is now, right, Jeremy?
But he, he literally sent me a picture of his fuselage going in his dining room and his tail extending up into his kitchen, and he was working on a wing panel in the living room. I mean, that's amazing. What you can do and what you want to do are probably two different things. But I thought that was just extraordinary, and it really put an exclamation point on what we've been trying to do as a design team in designing and building an airplane that can be built virtually anywhere.
Larry would like to know if the Sport Acro structure is any different than the standard Sonex.
The Sport Acro structure is identical to a standard Sonex. The only change we've made structurally to this airplane, two of them. One would be the aileron, and the aileron actually extends instead of a standard Sonex, and I'm going to see if I can find a little better picture. In a standard Sonex, the aileron would actually extend, and this is me flying the Sport Trainer, it's about 40 inches long at each wingtip, there and there. In the Sport Acro version, you actually have an aileron start mid-span and come out to the tip. So the idea is you're trading flap area in the inboard section for aileron area in the outboard section. That's structural change number one. By the way, the push rods, everything else, that remains the same. On the Sport Acro interior, we actually wanted to show, hey, this is something that you can fly as a sportsman class aerobat, or even do some harder stuff if you want. And we bumped out the seat back and actually allowed for a guy to strap on a parachute and not lose any headroom. And so you'll notice in the Sport Acro version we actually have a little bumped out seat area, which we are planning to release as a plans update for those of you that want to build a Sonex Sport Acro the way we show it.
Okay, and Paul has time in a 150 and a Warrior. What will the transition be like?
Remarkably smooth. I transitioned into the airplane you see before you, and I always like to tell personal stories whenever I can. The Sport Acro, when it was shiny silver, you maybe saw it back in 1999 or 2000 for the first time. I transitioned from a Cessna 152, and I had 62 hours in my logbook. And I went to fly with my father for about a 5-hour transition period, and I flew the Sonex. And I have never been intimidated since. And by the way, for all the test flying I've done and all the different little configuration changes that we've done, very carefully and deliberately and thoroughly test flown, I've never been in a situation in any of our aircraft that I've been uncomfortable. And I think that speaks about as loudly as anything I can say about the product line. I love it.
Okay, and Brandon would like to know what tools will be required to build any of the Sonex YX and Xenos as far as sheet metal tools are concerned, or just tools that you might not normally have.
Yep. I highly recommend you go to the Sonex website immediately, and that's a good transition to our final slide. And please watch the 1-hour presentation on tools. I think it's a very concise update, just kind of on tools, and it goes through exactly what you just asked. What questions do I need? And let me step back a little bit. The gentleman that was just asking about transitioning into the Sonex, the only comment about a Cessna 152 versus a Sonex is the Sonex is definitely sportier. That's what we built it for. So 99% of the time, when I take somebody for a first ride in a Sonex, I turn to them and I say, let go of the stick. Because they have this death grip on the stick, and they feel like they have to be in complete control. Let go of it. Let the airplane fly. Let it do its thing. It will take good care of you. And I love it when I see guys with just 2 fingers on the stick just flying the airplane, because that's what it's all about. Ways to follow the Sonex aircraft. This goes to the other gentleman's question about tools. I highly recommend you spend some time on the Sonex website. It's got everything you need and then some. We have our opt-in mailing list, which I periodically make postings to, as well as the rest of our staff. We even have a Twitter account. Some of you might ask what that is. You're about to learn, as well as this RSS services, and that's the website at the top. I highly recommend you join the Sonex Talk email lists. Those are on the Yahoo groups. We're the most popular, I think, top 3 aviation e-groups on Yahoo groups. We're very active. Come to a Sonex workshop. Come to a Sonex workshop. That is a very intense weekend workshop. Everything we just talked about. You hear a lot from me, the rest of the Sonex staff, and I highly recommend you come. We'll talk about the schedule in a second. Come to AirVenture. We're going to have a ton there, July 26th through August 1st. Mark your calendar. Come to AirVenture. And check out our Hornets Nest R&D that I just touched on, little updates, which you're going to see turn into formal web updates. And there's the Sonex workshop schedule I just talked about. We have one in just a couple of weeks, May 1st and 2nd. It's filling up fast. And then we do them basically in the fall in October, in the winter in February, and then again in the spring of 2011 and the fall of 2011. You can't do anything better to learn about the Sonex than come to a workshop. And we even give you about $1,000 in incentives just to make that workshop. So mark your calendars and plan ahead. Come on over.
Okay, one more question, Jeremy, and then I think we're going to pull the plug on it. And that is Mike's bought the tail kit, and he's convinced himself that he can do this. Can he purchase the rest of the kit at once, or must he continue with the sub-kit purchases?
Mike, that is choose your own adventure, my friend. The answer is, I'll give 2 answers. Yes, you can buy the tail kit is what I just circled at the top of the screen here. That's what you already built, the horizontal and vertical. We have done a deal where you can buy all the rest of the you can buy all the rest of the kit for basically the same price as if you would have started with the whole thing. So we just deducted the price of the tail kit, and you can buy it, and that's just kind of a penalty-free way to go. If you other way to go is to keep on building your confidence. Maybe buy a wing kit, move to a fuselage kit, move to your gear kit. Yeah, you can do that too. You're just going to be about $2,000 ahead of the game, plus some shipping if you buy the remaining kit, what we call the sub-kit remainder now. And obviously, I love the idea of you doing that, but I'll support you whether you do sub-kits or the full thing.
Great. Well, Jeremy, we still have a ton of questions sitting here, but I notice we're already 15 minutes past the time that we said we would end this. We had over 340 people on tonight. Another great turnout for a great topic. I want to thank you for taking the time out to talk about the various Sonex designs. Obviously, always of interest to the EA members out there. And, just pleased with the turnout, and hopefully everybody enjoyed it. But, Jeremy, thanks for taking the time tonight. And
thank you, Charlie. I just wanted to say, you know, to all of our builders, to all of our customers out there, we love you guys. We really appreciate everything you do for us. And obviously, you're the reason we're in this business. You're the reason we'll continue to be in this business. And we do truly listen to your feedback. So please feel welcome to email. This is our sales email. It's one collector. It's a gentleman named Mark Schabel. But our entire staff monitors their email and forwards things to me that may be of interest to the community. And please regularly check our website. We are very committed to updating it regularly. And we really appreciate everything EAA has done in kind of dragging us into the technological revolution here, and we promise to continue to be a partner in education and encouraging everybody to be a part of this great thing called home building.
Yeah, and on the technology note, if you haven't watched any of the EAA Hints for Home Builders videos, many of them were done in conjunction with Sonex, and as Jeremy pointed out, they usually are the guinea pigs because they're right in our backyard. And I don't know, I think you've done 3 or 4 at least yourself, and your whole staff has probably done a dozen of them, I would guess, Jeremy, right?
Yeah, and we'll continue to be a part of that, the Hints for Home Builders. I mean, selfishly, Charlie, it's meant a lot fewer tech calls, which means you're not frustrated by busy signals, and we can keep moving on other projects like E-Flight and the Jet and the cool Onex. That time is money, as you all know, and we try not to treat what we do as a business, but at the end of the day it is. You know, we're going to continue to do whatever we can to support you guys and keep you moving on your projects. And we can't give you motivation, but we can continue to do things like this to encourage you to make it as easy as we possibly can, and I promise we'll continue to do that as long as I'm around.
Great. Well, thanks again, Jeremy. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. If your question was not answered, email the sales@sonexaircraft.com if you still have that question and need an answer. Thanks for tuning in tonight, and hopefully you'll catch you on another webinar. Thank you.
Have a great night, everybody. Thanks.